we are starting on page 47 and then talking about the spiritual experience, which is an appendix. So if you want to have your book ready, but let's start really quick, and not really quick, but in all seriousness, with a moment of silence followed by the set aside prayer. And I pulled up the one that is used in the Bronx. So the Bronx has a big book study every night at 6 p.m. Pacific time. So that's 9 p.m. on the East Coast. It's out of New York. If you want that information, I know Jill would be happy, and I can put it in the chat. I'm sure Ron has it too. But this is their version of the set aside prayer. And the reason I brought it up is because we chatted about that last week. So that's the reason I'm bringing it up. So let's take a moment of silence to recognize the alcoholic that's struggling inside and outside of the rooms. Okay, and I will share. Thank you guys, and I will share the screen. So you can join in or you can just listen, no worries. God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about myself, the 12 steps, the big books, the meeting, my disease, and you, God, so that I may have an open mind and a new experience with all of these things. Please let me see the truth. And you can tell that's a screenshot that I took, so a long time ago. Anyways, Jill, I will pass it over to you. And just as a FYI, we try to communicate in the chat. I'm posting right now a link to past recordings. It is free. You do have to create a Dropbox account, but you can find past recordings from, like, what are we at? We're about 18. No. We're about 15 months in at this point. We've done it a year and about 3 or 4 months. We've gone through it all once. So we're back on another, and we've been changing it. So, okay, all yours, Jill. I'll be quiet.
Oh, good evening, everyone. You're my family of choices, I like to say. My name is Jill. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic, and tonight is Big Book Club night. And just to recap, on page 46 and 47 last week, we highlighted a couple of paragraphs that are the basis for where we find the words in the set-aside prayer. And the one that we just read is slightly different than the one we showed you last week. And the whole point is that what we're setting aside is prejudice. Prejudice, okay, so if you've relapsed or you're not feeling particularly sober emotionally, you're in a state, I like to say, of dis-ease. So what are we going to do about that? We can either keep going on the same way that we have been, or we can try, no matter how long we've been in the program or how short we've been in the program, try and have a new experience in here tonight. So when I came into AA and out of AA and into AA and out of AA and into AA and out of AA for decades, the biggest reason was that I didn't have any concept of a power greater than Jill. I also wasn't willing to let go of drinking or of abusing prescription medication and taking it the way it wasn't prescribed. So both of those are my journey. And when I look back at it, what I hadn't done and where I've since seen a lot of sponsees struggle and go out again is I just wasn't plain ready to quit drinking. You know, I had a routine, I had a liquor store I went to, I had a cycle I went through. I drank first thing in the morning to, as Bill said, stop the jitters, after I'd said I would never be a morning drinker because morning drinkers were alcoholics. And all of the things that I thought was different about me and why I was special, they always say in here, just wait. And you know, if you haven't gone to rock bottom yet, they say add the word yet. I hadn't lost my home-based businesses, my relationship, but I lost my self-respect, I lost my dignity, and I lost my ability to trust myself because my higher power was alcohol and drugs. So if you're still going in this cycle of drinking and not drinking, and then trying to pretend you're not drinking, and being half honest about drinking, and you're full of shame and self-loathing, your alcohol is still your higher power. So where we have been in this last month is working on step one, where we have said to ourselves, I am powerless over alcohol. And we've gone through this line by line and outlined all the points in the book where we're powerless. Okay? And then we went through and we said unmanageability. And Bill wrote a bunch of beautiful little examples of different alcoholics that got themselves into all kinds of trouble, so that, including the jaywalker, so that we could see some extreme examples of how insane our behavior is when we give in to the craving. So that's where we've been. And then we went through on page 46 and 47, and we highlighted two paragraphs that have the words prejudice in them. So on page 46, halfway down the paragraph that started with how could a supreme being, there was the one we found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice, so that's an origin of the set aside prayer. And then we recovered on page 47, the third sentence in, do not let any prejudice you may have against, in this case, it says spiritual terms. So the set aside prayer we had as an example last week was my sponsors, and it included the term spiritual terms. So prejudice against a spiritual term leads us quite nicely into where we are tonight. Because if you mentioned the G word, I immediately went, here we go. Okay, they've sold me a book and now they're talking about God. So how is this different than any other cult or extreme group? Like, how is this going to do anything about my drinking? So this brings us tonight where we are, which is page 47.
Jill,
yeah?
I'm going to interrupt. I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to do that. But I think I've got a different book because they're not on my book. Those pages that you say, like.
I can go over that with you after, Mandy. Right now, let's just turn to page 47. Can everybody find the second full paragraph that started, we needed to ask ourselves? Has everybody got that? Okay, so that is the step 2 question. So you can write that in the margin for yourself. This is what we're starting tonight. Have you got that, Mandy? We needed to ask ourselves. It's on page 47. It's in the middle of the page. We needed to ask ourselves. Can everyone put their hand up if they found it? Okay, we're all there then. Okay, Amy, do you want to start with assigning someone to read then, please?
Sure. Tessa, real quick, I can tell. Oh, you put your hand up on purpose. Okay, that's cute. Sorry. My bad.
Sorry, that's okay. I got my camera off because okay.
No, keep it off. I just was being silly. Let's see. Sherry, would you like to kick us off? Usually you guys, there's a couple new people. It looks like Steve and Nick. Welcome. We read paragraph by paragraph. And you do not have to read if you don't want to. When I call on you, if you want to read, but I'll start with Sherry, and Sherry will read the first paragraph, pause. Jill will fill in, and other people do sometimes. And then Sherry, I'll have you read that second paragraph, and then I'll switch readers.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Amy. Okay. We needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? As soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built.
Okay, so that is, and I've written in the margin next to that paragraph, because this is part of the homework that my sponsor gave me when I went through these pages with her. And this is the step 2 question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing? And circle that word willing. Willing. Can you open your mind? just a crack to an idea that there might be a power greater than yourself. Don't even have to really do it yet. You just have to be willing to say, hey, maybe it's possible. Maybe I'm not omnipotent, I'm omnipresent. Maybe I'm not divine. Maybe there's something out there that actually made these mountains and the animals and everything else. For me, that's great outdoors. That was my initial concept of God. For some people, it's the group. Or if you think I've got a God, or someone else in here has a higher power, you can borrow ours until you figure out what yours is. The point is, it's not a religious deity. And this is where Bill Wilson split with the Oxford group over this very issue, because 50% of the people that he was working with that were starting Alcoholics Anonymous were agnostic. And so when you've got a membership where half of them don't believe in God, or they're not sure what God is, how can you make that a central principle? So he worked really, it was actually a couple of other people in here, that Hank Parker and a couple of others, that said, okay, let's get our head around, and here's the kicker. Am I even willing to believe that there is an underlying this power greater than myself? So essentially what that's saying to me is I've got to get out of my own way. My ego just has to, for a second, take the back seat. And I just have to open my mind to the idea that there could be something bigger than me. And then it says, as soon as a man, and we know at the time this is written, it was always the man who was the alcoholic, because there's not such thing as a woman alcoholic, is there? As soon as a man can say that he does believe, and again, here's the kicker, it's again, or is willing to believe. So circle that willing again. This all starts with willingness. Willingness. You were willing to come to this meeting and enlarge your spiritual recovery. That's willingness. You showed up and turned up here for yourself. Okay? And then it says, we emphatically. What does that mean? Emphatically. That means completely, strongly, with great emphasis, assure him that he is on his way. And that's what the words here are telling us. Just open your mind, be willing, be teachable, and it opens the door. And that's our experience. Then it says, it has been underlined. What does repeatedly proven mean? Repeatedly proven. Millions of us have recovered as a result of this program. Repeatedly proven, I've got an arrow to it. What does that mean? My experience. That is what repeatedly proven means. You don't have to take my word for this. There's, as we read in the preface, millions of people who followed this simple program, done the work, and been relieved from that horrible craving and that mental obsession. So it's been repeatedly proven among us that upon this, and I've highlighted the rest of this sentence, upon this simple cornerstone. Now, what's a cornerstone? So if I'm building a house out of stone, it is the very central foundation block for whether my house is going to stand up or not. Okay? So I have to make sure my foundation is really strong here, or the whole darn thing's going to come falling down. It's simple. It's a block of stone, but it's upon which everything else rests. So the spirituality that we're going to look for and find in this room is the cornerstone of our recovery. A wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. So think about it as the church of Steve, or the church of Alicia, church of Nick, the church of each and every one of you, if you want to use the model of a church or a mosque or whatever your little place is going to be, your spiritual little place. This is the cornerstone. Tonight, we're building a cornerstone that you're going to build your foundation with your God as you understand your God to be. Now, that's not too daunting, is it? You don't have to believe in any particular religion. You don't have to accept my version. We're just giving you, and you're willing to contemplate that. Okay, so then there's an asterisk here. And it says at the bottom, spiritual experience. Okay, so why is it said at the bottom, please be sure to read Appendix 2 on spiritual experience. So we're going to flip to 567. So at the end of the paragraph we needed, I've drawn a big arrow, page 567. Okay, so we're now going to flip to 567, and Amy's going to help take us through this spiritual experience. So remember, there's a reason, there's not very much in the big book that's been changed in the last 89 years. In fact, they voted that not a single word be changed, because that's why we still say man instead of man and woman and all the politically correct things we do, because they found that over the last 89 years, people have got the message with this simple language. However, there are prefaces at the beginning of the book that have been added to the 164 pages, and the spiritual experience is written afterwards as well, because Bill felt this needed to be elaborated on. Okay, Amy, over to you again.
All right, it's putting the page number in the chat. Okay, so do you want to just read from here? Do you want to actually read it or just discuss it?
I think that we can discuss it if you want to give us your overview.
Oh, goodness.
And then I think it's important that each of you take the time to read this. Okay, it's page 567. This is some homework for everybody. And then next time we can discuss it, because it really helps you fluff out for yourself. I can't tell you what your God is any more than you can tell me what my higher power is. So the homework today is for you to think a little bit about what's bigger than you. Okay, so we're now on page 567, spiritual experience.
Okay. So I'll just read you some of the notes I have in this book here, since I didn't necessarily prepare anything for this, but I'll tell you what I have. So I have that most of us, so one of the things that I notice when I read this section that I hear a lot in meetings is the difference between, the people want to make a big difference between a spiritual experience and a spiritual awakening. And one of the reasons, from my understanding, that this section was added, or this appendix was added, was because Bill shared kind of this white light experience where the obsession was just lifted. And not everybody who's come through the program has that same situation. And so he was getting a lot of questions like, well, I didn't have that white light experience. I didn't have the obsession just immediately removed. You know, it says sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, right? And though he went a lot, he came in and out of the rooms a lot. When it was lifted, it was gone, according to what he shares. So this was added to make sure that people understand that everybody's journey is different. Everybody's understanding of the higher power is different. It's a personal relationship. It's a personal journey. The key is you're not the higher power. And in my case, alcohol was my higher power and absorbed all my time, all my mind, all my energy, all my focus. Everything I did was, where am I going to get it? How's it going to be here? What am I going to do? Even if I didn't drink for 6 months, I knew when that 6 months was over. Like, I knew I had a date, had a plan. I knew it was going to happen. So the spiritual experience and spiritual awakening in here is outlining how our solution is in these steps. And in step 2, we're just, and all this is just mind blowing to me when I really, because at first I just was whipping through the steps, is step 2 is just being willing to accept there's a higher power. You're not even saying, hey, I hand my life and everything and my will over to you. Just, I'm willing to accept there's something out there greater than me. So, I do hear, and off the top of my head, I want to be really careful, because I have thought in my own thoughts about spiritual experience and spiritual awakenings. Like, I have and this is my intake, this is my opinion. I have spiritual experiences all day long. If I'm in conversation with my higher power, if I really truly am, and that's what gives me peace and serenity and joy. But then I have some spiritual awakenings, which to me are like these big momentous times when like I'm like, oh, and I just all of a sudden wake up and I all of a sudden just see the light. So like I feel like I had this huge spiritual, and maybe I have it backwards. Y'all might think this is backwards, but I see a difference in the two. When my white light experience happened, when I was in the detox center and an H&I volunteer came in and shared that alcohol was a disease and I wasn't a bad person trying to get well, but I was a sick person who needed a solution. And the big book was my solution. This was my medicine. And that clicked and I accepted it as my daily reprieve. And if I did this, I could do it. I could make it. And I decided, I understood that there was a higher power and that my willpower wasn't going to do it. I've been trying. My works was not working. Kind of like, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but Mandy and Shauna and I stayed on afterwards today, and Trina was sharing that detail, kind of along those lines, right? And so that I feel like I've had major spiritual awakenings, but I have spiritual experiences all day. So I underlined at the bottom of page 183, and I work out of 2 books. So I'm just going with this little book I've been using with us for this group to add more stuff. But I love the last sentence where it says in the mid sentence. Oh, well, I start with the third to the last sentence. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. And then I went on to, most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of a spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it a God consciousness. And that's why, so I guess I am saying it correctly. I think that's my day-to-day, all day long kind of interaction with my higher power. And then, so I'm going to just read the last little part because I have so many notes. I don't want to just piece it apart. So most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems and the light of our experience can recover. So like I highlighted these like main words. Any alcoholic capable of honesty facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. And that to me is that set aside prayer that we read. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance and belligerent denial. And I have that labeled as a warning. And I have it written down. I just did this with somebody, oddly. Hostility, aggressive, defiant, and combative. That's belligerent denial. And that's just using, I don't know if you guys are familiar, since this is a teaching AA meeting, that you can get these. They're $3 online or in person. Okay, let me put it close to me. You can get a dictionary for the big book, and then you can get a dictionary for the 12 and 12. So, and then you can get the little dictionary. If you go to in-person meetings, a bigger meeting will have them, but you can order them online too. I don't even know how I acquired mine. Mine were acquired randomly as I was going through my journey, and people would hand me things, and I just kept a stack of stuff. And then later on, I was like, oh, that was useful. I think I have that. And I would go find it. So I don't, but I know I see them in meetings. So anyways, now I'm going to just read this last part. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of this program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. And I've had people write that as how and who, right? HOW and WHO, how and who, because that stands for honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. So you can say, how do you do this? Or who helps you, right? God, or your higher power. And so I put absolutely in my notes, I put on absolutely anyone can have this. So I highlighted, just like Jill's been mentioning, willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness. And because there's some new people here, new to this group, I'm not saying you don't know this stuff in any way, but anytime it's italicized, they, that took a lot of effort back in the day, not today, but that took a lot of effort when they were writing it originally. So that's real emphasis on those words. And then I hear a lot of people quote this or reference this quote from Herbert Spencer. So I'll just read it. There is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. The principle is contempt prior to investigation. And I've heard that. It's kind of funny to end this beautiful spiritual experience with kind of a negative quote, in my opinion, but that warning, contempt prior to investigation. And this meeting I was just in, the person highlighted that sentence like emphatically, and I never heard it. But contempt prior to investigation, these were the notes I took. Again, sorry, I don't know, maybe, I hope my internet's not bad. But contempt prior to investigation, they defined it as, you won't listen, and I won't look at my blind spots. I disregard for something that should be taken into account. Like, I disregard it before I even give it a chance. Before I even dig into it, I just say no prior to any investigation. And I'll stop there because I hope my
Well, that's actually fitting and right on, because what is that? It's prejudice. Contempt prior to investigation.
I didn't put that together.
No, I'm having a new experience with the book right now too, because that is another definition of prejudice. And that's what we've just been trying to get our heads around. So, if you're finding this stuff really a bit sort of hard work to get into, think about what we're trying to do here. We're trying to open our friggin' mind. And the reason we're trying to do this is because the way we've been trying to do this before isn't working, right? If we're relapsing and we're continuously struggling with this craving, there's something we haven't done. And I'm here to tell you that I finally got told what I hadn't done, and I haven't had the craving ever since. Because what I had, two things. I hadn't done a proper step one. I hadn't admitted I was powerless over alcohol because I kept going out and experimenting. If I keep going out and doing this, I'm not admitting anything. I'm still in self-will. So until I'm ready to actually do what I'm told in here, I'm just turning up and doing FaceTime. Right? I turned up at meetings drunk. I get people phoning me that have been drinking and using. And it's very, very hard to break through to that and say, because I was there myself, God, how do I get out of my own way? And then we hear people have really bad situations happen, and they get what's called the gift of desperation, because they're court ordered to come in here, they almost die, or we know it's a progressive disease, we do something really humiliating this time, or we harm somebody. So what we're saying now is, let's save ourselves that agony. We're all bright people. Let's get out of our own way. And that's where we are tonight. We've admitted we're powerless over alcohol. And then I remind, for those who weren't here before, it doesn't say and in step one. It goes straight to unmanageability because of my drinking. It's not due to my mother, my father, my brother, the economy, politicians, or anything else that I'm in this mess. It's my drinking. or it's my using, right? That's what's getting me there. I'm not really rude to people and falling down drunk and embarrassing and sarcastic and horrible on texts and all the other things I'm ashamed of, unless I'm drinking, right? Is that the same for you? It's like I'm a nice person, but when I take into my body this stuff, I'm allergic to it. I have a disease, and then I turn into the world's nastiest person. Believe me, you don't want to know that, Jill. So step 2, let's go back to where we are now, 47. And that was a great segue, Amy, really well done. Is there, just before we move back into it, is there anybody that would like to elaborate on the spiritual experience or a spiritual awakening before we move on? Okay, let's just press on then. So we're now on the paragraph on page 47 that starts, "That was great news."
Thanks, Jill. I'll pick it up from there. That was great news to us, for we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith, which seemed difficult to believe. When people presented us with spiritual approaches, how frequently did we all say, "I wish I had what that man has. I'm sure it would work if I could only believe as he believes. But I cannot accept as surely through the many articles of faith which are so plain to him." So it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level.
And that's what we're really trying to tell you right here. You don't have to suddenly have the Bill's white lightning experience. You don't have to find God. You don't have to find religion right here and now to continue on with this program. All you're doing in this step is opening your mind. You're becoming willing. And when you think of all the time and effort, for me, that I put into getting my alcohol or my drugs, hiding them, managing them, reorganizing them, forgetting about them, rediscovering them, stashing them, like it was exhausting. So now I'm not doing that. How big a deal is it to take some of that energy and maybe open my mind to a new way of thinking? Creative thinking, huh? Let's just say today's the first day. We're going to just say, okay, maybe I don't have to take this weight that's on my shoulders and I can let go of it. And I can trust that there's something bigger than me that's going to help me through this. Here's another way of thinking about it. You can actually make us your higher power at the beginning. You can make the group your higher power until you develop a concept yourself of what you can believe in. Try believe in this group. Here's another way of looking at it. So keep looking at this different ways until something sticks for you. Because honest to goodness, the only thing that made sense to me were animals and trees. I couldn't get my head around anything else that illustrated a higher power to me. That's where I began. Today, my higher powers evolved into something quite a bit different. But I want you all to take a second and just feel a sense of relief and say, you can say it out loud, I don't have to do this alone. Ever again, ever. You've got this group. And gradually, you're going to have your own concept that is going to take away the responsibility of you thinking you've got any control anyway. Because as I've discovered, I can make all sorts of plans and I can put a lot of energy into making things go a certain way. And then my higher power, which actually is got a good sense of humor, turns around and says, "Good plans, Jill. It's not going to go like that at all." But the point is, I'm not responsible for your feelings, my mother's feelings, my father's feelings, my brother's feelings. All I'm responsible for is letting go and letting something bigger than me help me through this process. What I'm responsible for is turning up to do the work. Okay, let's carry on.
Hey, does anyone in particular want to read, or you want me to call on you? I don't want to jump on anybody. Steve, you look like you could read, but I don't want to, I know you're new to our group, so I hate to just.
What page do I have to read?
We're on page, the bottom last sentence of page 47 into 48, and just read that next paragraph. It's a big one. So it says, besides a seeming
Inability, yeah.
Page.
Bottom of page 47, the last sentence.
Yeah, my internet's not working, so or I
no
can't
worries.
pull up the
No
page.
worries. Melissa's got
Oh,
it.
you're doing well.
No
The
worries.
sentence that
We're glad
starts, do
you're
you
here.
see the sentence that starts besides a seeming inability?
Melissa, you got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you go for it, Melissa, and then Steve will get back to you. Besides, go ahead, Melissa. Besides, the word bottom is 47.
Beside and seemingly inability to accept much on faith, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy,
Obstinacy.
sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. Many of us have been so touchy that even casual reference to the spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. This sort of thinking had to be abandoned. We thought, or through some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became a part of open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great crusader. It finally beat us into the state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process, but hope no one else will prejudicate for as long as some of us were.
Excellent. Okay, that's a really big paragraph because you know what it is? It's the other part of the set-aside prayer. So we had marked on page 46, on the middle, we had that sentence with prejudice. Okay, so let's break down this word prejudice that keeps coming up. We've seen it page 46. We found it that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice, then it said on page 47, do not let any prejudice you have. So a prejudice is basically an opinion that I have about something that I've made up my mind, and I'm not willing to unplug my ears and hear anything to the contrary about it because I've made up my mind. And then I tar everything that is similar to that with the same brush. So let's take a stupid example. Let's say I don't like anyone who drinks hot beverages. So I'm then in every country prejudiced against all the tea drinkers and all the coffee drinkers. Okay, that's a prejudice. There's no real reason for me to not like anyone in here that drinks coffee, but I've decided everyone who drinks hot beverages is a bad person. So a prejudice is a strong opinion that we've got about something, a term, the big book, AA. So now we're in this, besides, again, and we're at the bottom of 47, besides a seeming inability to accept much on faith, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy. Circle the word obstinacy. That word in easy language means stubborn. Then it says sensitiveness. And here it comes again, the word prejudice, but notice before the word prejudice the time, it says unreasoning. So circle that word unreasoning. What does that mean? If you don't look at something with any reasoning, it means you don't think about it. My father voted conservative, therefore I vote conservative. I don't think through what their policies are. I don't reason through anything. That's a prejudice I have. Anyone that's not conservative, I have a prejudice against. I think only people that ride horses ought to live, I don't know, in the mountains. So anyone that has dogs shouldn't. That's a prejudice. Take any single thing that you have a strong opinion about without reasoning, without thinking. It's a prejudice. Okay? So this whole paragraph at the top of 48, I've put a bracket, set aside prayer, because it's the third part of the set aside prayer. And what we're going to do in here as we move on is we're going to write our own set aside prayer. We're going to stop and think about what's blocking me from getting this program. Am I prejudiced against AA? Is there something about AA that I think is really weird? Am I prejudiced against, why can't I get the message? What is blocking me from, as they say later in the book, the sunshine of the Spirit? We got to figure this stuff out because we're going to keep drinking. And for us, to drink is to die. So then it says, and I've highlighted this, and I want you to too. It's the second full sentence on page 48. This sort of thinking had to be abandoned. What does abandoned mean? To give up completely, to walk away from, to never revisit. It has to be. This is what they're saying to us. We have to change our stinking thinking, or we're going to go back and do the same loop that we did before. And then it says in this final sentence, okay, it finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. Now, I love that because it means I'm turning my own thinking over, opening my mind, and no alcoholic likes to be told what to do, right? Do you guys like to be told what to do? Well, maybe I'm going to set aside my prejudice and I'm going to be reasonable. Now, that's not something I've been accused of very often when I've been drinking. But here, we're changing our thinking. So we're just entering into a conversation in here where we're going to be reasonable. And we're not going to come in here with a bunch of opinions about what you're thinking or I'm thinking. All we're going to do together is stop you from drinking and give you a power that you're going to figure out that is greater than you. And that power is going to hold your hand and walk you through this journey the rest of your life. And you get to define what that power is. So we can't be prejudiced about it because you're the one defining it. Does that make sense? How can you not believe in something that you're figuring out what you can believe in? It's impossible not to believe in it if you're the one defining it. So here's the thing. The cornerstone, this power greater than ourselves. Why is this such a cool thing? Why am I so excited about this? Because the weight that came off my shoulders when I realized I was no longer responsible for running every show, your show, my show. I'm hoping you're getting my message tonight, but I'm detached from the result because it's not up to me. But it is within your power if you are in here tonight willing to think a little bit differently. So that's got to be pretty cool. And then the last sentence, sometimes this was a tedious process. Okay, I sent Amy a cartoon earlier this week, and it had 2 meetings. And one of them said big book study, and there was nobody going through the door. And then it had another door to a meeting, and it said meeting where I get to talk about myself, and it was standing room only. So sometimes I just have to do stuff that's tedious, but at the same time, you're going to learn something that not only can save your life, but you get to pass it on. When you no longer have, and it is my experience, your desire to drink will go away. But then the only way it stays away is if you pass it on to somebody else who hasn't quite got this yet. See, here's the graphic. Check it out. Book study. Nobody going through the door. Meeting where you can talk about yourself. The door's off the hinges and everybody's gone in there. Because, and that's not a bad thing that we want to discuss ourselves, but at the end of the day, we're trying to get out of self-will. Is everybody following this, or am I just talking in loops here? No, we're getting this? Okay. So then the last something, this was a tedious process, semicolon. We hope no one else will be, here it is again, 6 times in 3 pages, prejudiced for as long as some of us were. So that's what our set aside prayer is everyone following what we're doing in here? We're opening our minds tonight. It doesn't matter if you get it all, but you're becoming teachable. Okay, let's carry, 747. What do we think here? I think that's because we get into the electricity analogy next, which is another concept. So I think let's stop there.